Welcome to Booked All Night, the podcast for book lovers and storytellers alike. I'm your host, Jessica Mary, and I'm joined weekly by Leigh and Magdalyn Ann as we geek out about books and the craft of writing them. This week, we're joined by Alicia Jasinska to discuss her most recent title, This Fatal Kiss, a whimsical fantasy filled with dark magic and a polyamorous romance. Welcome to Booked All Night, Alicia. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm very excited. We had a lot of fun recording the episodes for you. There's a lot of screaming on the podcast. And speaking of screaming, I think my first question is, why does it end there? And absolutely feel free to throw your editor right under the bus. We absolutely have one of Wojciech's teacups with their name on it, just right in the teacup.
I actually think I will be the one going under the bus because my editor is the one who's like, you should like try and tie things up more, because personally I really like open-ended stories. I know most people hate that, but it's just like a personal preference. So yeah, you should thank my editor, like that things were tied up a bit more than what was originally drafted. But like, I feel like that was the point to stop, because so that's the point, like sort of she's accomplished like what she's set to do at the beginning, not exactly in the way she had planned, but that part of her journey like is complete. So I thought that was a good place to end. And yes, there's questions that haven't been answered yet that I was always hopeful that I would get to explore more like in a sequel. So yes, I'm sorry for that, but
just to be certain, there is a sequel, right?
I can't officially confirm or announce anything until like I get the official green light from my publisher, but I am definitely working on it. I was drafting this morning, like before this. As I said, I get a bit anxious with this sort of thing, so I was trying to distract myself and working on the manuscript. So yes, I can't officially confirm, but I'm very hopeful that I will get to write a sequel. In my head, I always pictured like it as a duology, and the first book would be about Gisella's story, and then a second book, if it happened, would be Alexi's story.
Ooh, I'm here for that. We're gonna just put you right in the teacup as punishment, and that's where you have to stay until you finish said sequel. It's one of our new sayings on the podcast. So characters do something we don't like. We're like, right in the teacup. Right, go in the teacup.
So I'm always curious about where a story starts in a storyteller's mind. What was the first scene that you thought of for This Fatal Kiss, and how did you know that you wanted to explore this particular story?
So the very first scene, like that sort of like popped into my head, I had a very clear image of like this angry, brooding exorcist chasing this water nymph through town and like screaming at her and like, get out of my town, go back to your river, demon. So that image was always very clear in my head, and it stayed. Like, it's still one of the first scenes, and I think it very clearly shows from the beginning like that dynamic between Kazik and Gisela. So yeah, the story sort of grew out of that. And like why I wanted to explore that story, it's more, I feel like my books, it sounds weird, but my books kind of grow out of each other. So this is my third book, and like the books are separate stories, but like with my debut, it was sort of revolved around like a hero-villain romance between two girls. And then after that, I was like, oh, I want to write a story like that's like a villain-villain romance. So that grew out of that story. And then with the Midnight Girls, the second book, like the characters, they've come back like from death, like as these kind of monstrous creatures, which I think is like a fairly common thing that happens in Polish and Slavic folklore. Like a lot of the spirits and demons, they're humans who didn't receive burial rites, or they didn't die naturally, and they come back as these creatures. And in the Midnight Girls, like these characters, they embrace that monstrosity, like they eat princes' hearts and like they revel in that. But then I was thinking, oh, but what if there was a girl who didn't necessarily embrace that monstrosity? What if there was a girl whose really desperate to regain her humanity, and like how would she do that? And that sort of became Gisella's story. So I wanted to explore that.
That was fun. We had a lot of fun exploring her story as we read it as well. I do have to put this as like a fun little disclaimer about our discussion about it. At the end of every episode, we tried to guess what was happening next, and our thoughts were incredibly depressing. We were like,
oh no,
yeah, we were like, oh, everybody's gonna kill themselves, and this guy's gonna die, and they're gonna get together like this, but it's gonna be like Frozen, and he's gonna be like, oh, Gisela, if only somebody loved you. Like we were so depressing, and I got to live all of that over and over again while I went back to edit the podcast. I'm like, there's something wrong with all three of us. So of the main three characters, which is Kajik, Gisela, and Alexei, who do you think changed the most during the story?
I think definitely Kajik has the biggest growth arc. Like his views really start to change, and he starts to question things like that he was taught and like the values he's grown up with. I think his is the most obvious character arc. Gisela also changes. Like, I think she definitely wants more for herself by the end of the book. Like, at the beginning, her life very much revolves around her brother, and she starts to want more than that. So, yeah, they're the biggest two changes. Alexei, I wouldn't say that he doesn't change. He's changing, but he's just very in denial about it. So, he's like, yeah, he's kind of in the middle stage, and hopefully he will get there eventually.
It's fun.
So was there anything that you wanted to keep that eventually got edited out of the story?
I was really lucky with my editor. Like, we very much sort of had the same vision for the story. Most of the things he asked me to, like, during editing rounds, like he asked me to revise, was more to flesh out the story rather than to remove anything. I'm also a big underwriter. Like, my first drafts are only like 50K. And then the story grows like with every revision. So it's not like I start with like 120K manuscript and he's like, well, you have to cut this, this, and this. So I do like that I'm an underwriter in that regard, because I usually don't have to cut as much. There was one thing that he did ask me to cut, and then I sort of sneakily found a way to keep it. It's not too much of a spoiler. I don't think if anyone is listening, like if they haven't read the book, that it will like ruin the story. So I will tell the story. So there is a Domovic, like a house spirit, in the story. He's adorable. I love him. And in one of the first rounds of edits, my editor was like, I think we should kill him. I think you should have a certain character eat him. And I can see it, and I'm like, yeah, that was my reaction too.
We love that little house spirit.
And it's like, oh my God, like I can't do this. So then like I was sitting brainstorming, and I'm like, oh, how am I gonna like get around this? What am I gonna say? Do I have to give him a call and like we'll talk through it? And eventually I was thinking, well, house spirits, like originally they appear like as sort of, they appear as like these little gnome-like creatures or like little people, or they can also take the appearance of like a small animal, like a dog or a cat or a family pet. And originally in that first draft, Domek always appears as like a little grandfatherly, like little man. And then I'm like, oh, you know what? I revised the manuscript and he appears like that at first. And then from then on, he appears as like this adorable, fat, orange cat for the rest of the manuscript. And then I sent that back to my editor. I didn't say anything about like his request. He read it and then he sent back notes. And his first note was like, I see what you did there. We can't kill the cat. Fine, he gets it.
Excellent.
And I was just like, yes, thank God. So you can find a way to negotiate with your editor. Like, you don't have to take all their notes.
That's wonderful, because we really love that little house spirit. He's so cute.
Aww.
And we had a lot of fun. I will dance around this particular topic, right? Because we're only like 10 minutes into recording. Where he realizes the identities of some other people involved in the story, and he keeps trying to let everybody else know, and he's just like having a little aneurysm on the table because nobody else in the room seems to recognize what the other person in the room is. And then they all leave, and he's like, what is happening? It was what we laughed about that. That was good fun for us.
Yeah.
And that, speaking of good fun, we are now at the very first game of the podcast. It is my favorite and probably Maggie's. Never have I ever spoiled my own book. If you have ever been to a sleepover and played Never Have I Ever, it is similar rules where we're going to give you some bookish and writerly cliched statements. There's 10 total, and if you have done 5 or more of them, then you have to spoil something from this fatal kiss.
Okay.
So the first one is, never have I ever attended a literary festival.
Damn it. I feel like I'm already going to lose this game.
That is the point of this game. I never write these like on at least
intentionally for people to win.
Yeah, on at least one occasion I would have been like, never have I ever written a book called This Fatal Kiss. Like this is not meant for our guests to win. Never have I ever written fan fiction.
No, I haven't actually. Like, I've read a lot of fanfic, but I have never actually written it.
Okay. Never have I ever read a book in one sitting.
Yeah, no. Yes, I have.
Never have I ever joined a book club.
Oh, yes. I think... Is it? I don't know if it's technically a book club. But yes, I think I have.
Never have I ever participated in a writing workshop.
No.
Oh. I went to school for writing, so I did that like every 2 days. It was a writing workshop. Never have I ever written a poem.
Oh, no, I haven't.
Oh, all right.
I'm not a poetry person. Like, I read it again. I read it, but I don't have that talent.
I tried to have that talent, and I can go on record saying, in fact, I do not have that talent.
Yeah.
Never have I ever written an entire manuscript without editing as I wrote it.
Oh no, I edit all the time. I cannot stop myself. I know I should, but I can't.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Never have I ever attended a writing retreat.
No, I haven't.
Oh,
I'd love to.
Yeah.
I would really love to. I think they look really good.
They're really fun. One of the ones that we have here in the States is the Highlights Foundation, and they are...
Oh, I've heard
yeah,
of
they're
that.
up in the Poconos. The cabins are beautiful. All of the food is farm to table. This is my free... unpaid advertisement for the Highlights Foundation because I really love going up there. It's amazing. You have done 4 of these so far. We have 2 left.
2 left. Okay. So I only have one life left.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, never have I ever visited a bookstore solely to browse.
No, I usually buy.
Ooh, okay. All right, last one.
Okay.
I'm one of those people who doesn't go shopping unless, like, I know I'm going to buy something.
Oh no, I get my hand held through the bookstore. I'm not allowed to go there with my own money and being unsupervised. The same thing with crafts. I'm also not allowed to go there with my own money unsupervised.
Yeah. I like to go and look at all the pretty things I can't afford. Except for today, when I went to the yarn store and came home with $60 worth of yarn.
Only $60
Oh,
worth of
wow.
yarn. Very nice.
Yeah, it was just 3 skeins. Just 3.
I have to tell you, given the price of yarn, I'm very proud of you.
Well, one of them was half off and the other 2 were like $18. And then this is also disregarding the $120 worth of yarn I bought the other day.
No.
Yeah, that's where all my money goes.
Oh my.
To be fair, it's my Christmas gift. So
That's fair. The final statement. Never have I ever borrowed a book from the library without returning it.
I'm a librarian, so there's no way I cannot You have to return your books, people. Like, please, like.
Well, in that case, you only did 4 out of the 5. The secrets get to stay in this fatal kiss.
Well, technically, I feel like I already spoiled something, so it's not. I gave you a little spoiler before the game.
That's true. That's true. It was a fun trade-off. I let you win the game that I never let people win. You already gave us a spoiler. It's fine. It's fine. Well, now we get to go back to questions.
All right, so back to some questions. Yeah. This Fatal Kiss has so many wonderful, beautiful, emotional lines. The amount of times that I've just sat there and stared at a sentence because it was so beautiful. Can you recommend any craft books or other titles for writers to study that might have helped you develop this voice?
Not craft books. Like, I think I do try to make an effort with my prose because, like, a lot of my favorite authors, like, they have really beautiful, beautiful lines, beautiful work. Like, if I could write like them, like, that would be my goal. I love Laini Taylor. Like, the way she uses words is just Naomi Novik. Like, my favorite all-time book is The Night Circus, which I think is one of the most beautiful books ever written.
Yes.
Like, if I could even get close to that level with my prose, I'd die happy. So I think if you read their work, I definitely recommend that. And other authors, like, who have those beautiful lyrical lines, I think Stephanie Garber is another one. Her work is beautiful. Just read a lot of that. And then a tip that I got when I was starting out was that you should also read poetry, which, again, I'm not a poet and I cannot write poetry, but I feel like that does really help because poets play a lot with language and, like, they come up with ways to describe things that you never would have thought of. So I do try to make an effort to read poetry now, even though before, I think it was because I studied poetry at school and it was just like, it turned me off completely because I hated it so much. But I do highly recommend that, and I feel like it has helped me improve as a writer as well.
I feel great sympathy for getting turned off of things from my education, especially poetry, because for a great long time I was an English secondary education major, so I had wanted to teach upper middle school, so like 7th grades, around like the 12-year-old mark. I know we all have different school systems everywhere.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, well, clearly when you want to teach 12-year-olds, you should be reading Shakespeare. I'm like, have you met 12-year-olds? I don't really want to read and understand Shakespeare, especially because Shakespeare was meant to be seen and heard and not read over like this. And we are destroying this as a text to be studied, and my teachers would be like, that's a shame. And then I transferred to a different school, and they were like, well, you'll have to retake all of your upper level Shakespeare classes. And I was like, I would rather jump off the nearest cliff than retake all of these Shakespeare classes. And so I will change my major. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Fun little trauma bonding for everybody listening to the podcast. So you've noted in a previous interview that you could never write a character based on someone that you know because too many of them read your books. So I'm curious as to where you do actually draw character inspiration from.
I actually don't remember saying that, but, like, I'm pretty sure it's true. Like, I agree with that. I think I have gotten into trouble in the past. Like, I think in my debut, I mentioned, like, a grandmother character, like, and her leather slipper and how she'd punish people with it. And I'd be like, I know people from my family were like, that's like your grandmother. Like, you can't mention those things. You'll make us look bad. So I learned my lesson from that. I feel like you can still draw inspiration from people you know, just as long as, like, they're not recognizable. As long as someone can't be like, yeah, I know you wrote that about me. Like, I think you can still, like, if there's someone you admire or, like, there's a trait that you admire about someone, you could build a character around that. But also, like, even just fictional characters that you really like, you can draw inspiration from that. I was reading, I know I shouldn't read reviews, like, I try not to, but I was reading, like, a very lovely review from someone who'd read an advanced copy of This Fatal Kiss, and they said, Alexi is really, like, Hal coded, like Hal from Hal's Moving Castle. And I was like, that wasn't intentional, But like, I can see it. He has his secrets and he's a bit over dramatic sometimes. So I think like if there's a character you like a lot and he has like maybe that flair for the dramatic, you could build a character like with that flair for the dramatic yourself. Like, don't make it like exactly a copy, but like you could be inspired by certain traits that from characters that you love and like build a character around that instead.
I like that.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for other writers who want to try to dip their toes into using their family's culture for inspiration?
I think if there's anyone like thinking about writing a story like inspired by their own culture, I think definitely go for it, please. YA fiction, like it's come a long way in terms of diversity and representation, especially I'd say in like the last 5 or so years. Been a big boom in more diverse titles and it's great, but there's still like so many stories that haven't been told yet, and everyone deserves to see themselves like in the books that they love. So I think if you're thinking about that, please do go for it. Please write that story because people need it. And advice-wise, I think especially writing a story based on your own culture or inspired by it, like it is just writing what you know. Like it's including those foods that you make at home, writing about the relationships you see in your community, the ways that people show love, like what they value. Like, is family really important? Like, I know family is very important in Polish culture, and like people show their love through food. So food is also very important. And like faith is another thing that's very important. And I think it's those values and stuff that you can get across on the page that's even more important than like the aesthetic. I don't know, like the set dressing, like maybe the folk costumes and like the foods again. But like even more than that set dressing, it's those shared values and the relationships like that you see in your own community. Because then people reading it will be like, yeah, that's my grandmother. Like, I know these people. Like, my grandmother also tries to feed me when I come around. Like, the guest is always like the god in the house. Like, it's that's just how people will see that in your writing, and the characters will feel real to them. So I think that's something that's important to get across on the page.
I think it's funny that you mentioned like food. I grew up in a Polish-Italian neighborhood, and every time you entered the house, somebody offered you food, and there was a lot of like, oh, yes. would you like this? I was like, oh no, I just ate. I didn't ask you if you just ate. I asked you if you would like this dish. And it's like, okay, yeah, all right. I will eat this. I'm a little afraid of you. I will eat this. It's okay.
Yeah, they will not let you leave the house hungry. Like, and if you like something, they'll be like, oh, you like this? I'll wrap some up for you. Yep. I will go to the kitchen. You can take this home with you. Like, you won't leave empty-handed or hungry.
Yeah. Neither of those things.
There has never been a moment when I've stepped into my babcha's house and there's not already food on the table. Like, it's always there. For a second, she's like, oh, come in. You're going to sit down and you're going to eat.
Yeah. Exactly.
Always. Yeah. Which brings us to the second game, which is a new game that I made up today. Haha. And it's a new game. So it's a new game for the podcast, and we're going to be taking some of the fun quotes. I did keep them to the first act, so I'm not spoiling anything for anybody.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. And so we've got some fun quotes, and you're going to be telling us who said them.
Oh God, I hope I can remember.
To me, they feel kind of easy. You know, like I'm reading over these. I'm like, yeah, that's definitely that character. But okay. The first one. Keep an eye out for our resident exorcist. He's been overzealous in his duties lately. So overzealous, I can't help but wonder if somebody has been provoking him.
That's our water goblin.
Yes.
Wojciech.
Yes. Yeah. Granddaddy Water King, as Katie likes to say, because she cannot pronounce his name. Then we have, it's simple. All you have to do is get a human to kiss you.
Gisela.
Yes.
Yes.
This was one of my favorite lines, and that is, how many times do I have to send you back to your river, demon?
Kaji.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
I didn't realize you were so desperate for my company that you'd actually kidnap me.
Gisela.
Yes. Now, how did you end up trapped in here, little frog?
Alexei.
Yes. And the last two, I think, might be a little tough, but we're gonna see. Don't worry, one day it'll have been so long since you were alive that nothing left in you will remember being human.
Ooh, that's one of the other Pusaki. Who was it? Zamira?
Yes! Yeah!
Yes!
And then this one, which I feel like had an entire 10-minute discussion about it on the episode that we got to it, was kiss and flirt with whoever you like. I don't care. I just think you're being an idiot. The living will always choose to be with the living. That's how it works. No human is ever going to choose to be with a dead girl.
Well, that's definitely Yulia.
Yes! Very well done.
Excellent. All right, back to the questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw in the acknowledgments that you grew up with Polish fairy tales, which have heavily influenced your work. What was your favorite growing up, and what's your favorite now, if it's different?
Like, oh, there's so many. I always loved any story that featured like Baba Yaga. I think that's where like my love for witches first came from. But my actual all-time favorite, even now, like as a kid and now, was like the folktale about like the fern flower. And it's mentioned in this Fatal Kiss as well. I don't know if you remember. It's just slightly in like the chapter on St. John's Eve, because the fern flower, it's like this magical flower that blooms once a year at midnight in the depths of the forest. And if you can find it, it will like grant you riches and magic. And people use the excuse like, oh, we're going to go search for the fern flower, but they're really just going to go hook up in the forest. So it is mentioned in the book, people joking about it. But yeah, I always loved that story. Like it's so, I don't know, so magical, like the idea of going to search for the fern flower. And like in the version, because there's so many versions of this story, the little boy who searches for it in the folktale, like, of course, he tries 3 times before he finds the flower because it's like protected by demons or it disappears by morning. So like he runs out of time, but he does eventually find it. And then like he gets all these riches and magic. But the catch with the fern flower is that you can't share any of that with anyone else. So then like he returns to his little village 3 times, of course, because it's a fairy tale and 3 times is just very important. And then like he sees like the people he knows having a hard time and he's like, oh, maybe I should help them out with my magic and my riches, but then I'll lose it. So no. And he goes back to his castle or whatever he's built. And he does this several times, 3 times. And the last time, of course, he comes back and like his family has died. And it's like, you didn't save them with what you had. And it's like, then it's all very dramatic and the earth splits open and then he gets swallowed and he's never seen again. So it's very slightly gruesome folktale. And I don't know, I just really loved it as a kid and I still like it now. And like, I know it has that moral, like, oh, family is more important. Like material possessions aren't as important as like riches and all that sort of thing. So it's a little bit of a moralizing tale, but I don't think I really paid attention to that when I was little. Yeah, so that's my favorite story. And yeah, I tried to write like a sort of retelling about it and then I got stuck, so I kind of abandoned it. Maybe I'll go back to it one day. Yeah.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, I would too. We had a lot of fun talking about Makeout Point Flower. Our next question about silly things. Would you believe you are not the first author we've ever interviewed who does aerial work?
Yes. I feel like there's actually quite a few of us. I know like Alison Saft, who wrote like A Far Wilder Magic. She does like silks and hammock and that sort of thing. And there's someone else. My mind has gone blank. I know someone else. So I think there's actually a few of us who do it. I don't know why. I feel like it got popular a few years ago. So people got into it. It's if you have a chance to try it, I'd highly recommend. Like I know me and a friend got into it because we wanted to get fit, but we don't like going to the gym and doing like on the treadmill and that sort of thing. So we were like, this looks fun and like kind of circusy, and that's how we got into it. So like I highly recommend if like you want to try a sport or get fit, try aerials.
That'd be so fun. I do I do want to try it. Who was it was Sarah Jean Horowitz for The Dark Lord Clementine who did that. She also did like other circus arts and like it did like a whole weekend group. And I was like, yeah, that's what you do. Your free time, you write books, and then you just go hang out from silks from the ceiling on the weekend. Totally normal. Absolutely fine. Have you ever had an idea come to you while you're hanging up there, and like, what do you do to make sure you don't forget it on your way down?
I don't, because I'm concentrating so hard on not falling and dying.
That's fair.
And also like just remembering like the next transition and the move for like if we're doing a routine to music and that sort of thing. Like I'm concentrating so hard, and I do aerials with my sister mostly, like doubles. So she'll be holding me or I'll be holding her. And like if I get distracted, like I would drop her and like she would die. So really cannot do that. I think she'd get really mad if like I was distracted as well.
Fair.
But it is like, I do like having that something so completely different, another creative outlet that's different from writing. And like when I get stuck on a manuscript or something, that's when I go do like aerials or something physical, because it sort of like completely switches your brain off, like, and you're focusing on something else. And then when you come back to writing afterwards, that's when it's like everything sort of unlocks, and like subconsciously you've been working out like all these plot points. So you'll get ideas. I generally get my ideas like on the drive home from aerials. That's when they'll start coming. And that's when I'm like panicking, like, oh, I need to remember this, or I'll pull over and start writing in my notes app. Like
it is absolutely true that physical activity and working out will release the happy chemicals.
Yeah.
I don't do that, and so the happy chemicals don't come out. But that's mostly because my back is broken. But like,
that's okay. You've got store-bought happy chemicals. It's okay.
I do have store-bought happy chemicals. If you can't make your own, store-bought is fine. Yes.
We are all suckers for the enemies to lovers tropes here. Can you recommend any titles with that trope that are close to your heart?
I love This Is How We Lose the Time War. Wait, did I say that title wrong? Is it?
No, that's correct.
Is it you or is it me? No, it is correct. I just had a mental blank.
Yeah. It's a good one. It's a good one. That was a happy. And I've mentioned before, I love Laini Taylor's work. So it like Daughter of Smoke and Bone is like a classic that I'll still reread and just enjoy it just as much as when I read it the first time. Naomi Novik as well, like Spinning Silver, highly recommend that book, especially if you do like Slavic folklore and that sort of thing as well. And of course, Holly Black's work, The Cruel Prince, and all of that trilogy. Definitely recommend for enemies to lovers if you like that.
Those are good books.
Reminds me, I need to go finish reading Daughter of Smoke and Bone.
Oh, and everybody's got to reread Tomi Adeyemi's Children of Blood and Bone, because that's getting a movie from Paramount soon.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I'm like, okay, back to that. That's a series I never finished because other books came out and I forgot what happened. So that works out for me. I'll just go reread stuff. So our very last question on any interview that we do, we love to give shout outs to everybody that helps to get a book out, because it is not just the writer. There's usually a team behind them. So is there anyone you would like to thank today? Anybody from agents to editors to writing groups?
So, well, definitely my editor, Jonah Heller, from Peachtree Teen. Actually, all the team at Peachtree Teen, shout out, like, I've had different people lots of people working on the book, doing copy edits, past pages, like even designing the beautiful cover. So the whole team, definitely shout out to them. And yes, my editor for letting me get away with things like not killing certain characters. I hope I don't come across as difficult to work with. Shout out to him. And my friend Orly always reads my very first terrible drafts. So even before anyone else has seen that, so shout out to her as well. Yeah.
In that case, that's a wrap on this episode of Booked All Night. Click that follow button and subscribe to the show. Share this episode everywhere you can, and don't forget to drop a review. We're a small corner of the internet, and every little bit helps. Visit the link in the show notes to see our other reviews, find us on Instagram and TikTok, and join our Discord community, where we'll be running all of our giveaways, posting excerpts, and streaming our interviews live, just like we did today. When we hit 100 members on the server, we're going to run our first giveaway. Booked All Night is produced by Rob Cook. Whenever you share an episode, be sure to tag us at Booked All Night Pod and say hi to our guy in the sound booth. Join us next week as we launch into The Prince of Glass and Midnight by Lindsay Miller. Until next time, my little Libernauts, this is Jessica Mary, Magdalyn Ann, and Alicia Jasinska signing off and reminding you all to stay booked all night.